Welcome to Turning the Table, the most progressive weekly podcast for today's food and beverage industry, featuring staff-centric operating solutions for restaurants in the hashtag New Hospitality Culture. Join Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60 and Adam Lamb as they turn the tables on the prevailing operating assumptions of running a restaurant in favor of innovative solutions to our industry's most persistent challenges. Thanks for joining us. And now, on to the show. Well, good afternoon. My name is Adam Lamb, and we are on another episode of Turning the Table. Today's topic is going to be efficiency versus productivity. Turning the Table is sponsored by Benchmark 60. CEO Jim Taylor is unfortunately unable to be with us today, so I'm going to wing it. My name is Adam Lamb. I'm your host for today, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about efficiency versus productivity. Before I get further with that, I want to make sure that if you have any comments, questions, smart-ass remarks, you post them in the chat, that you like the episode, and know that we do this every Thursday at noon. The intent is that we talk about staff-centric solutions for restaurant operations in support of the hashtag New Restaurant Culture. And people might get a little nervous when I talk about the new restaurant culture as opposed to like, well, what's wrong with the old one? That's a great place to start. So the whole idea behind naming the show Turning the Table is kind of a double entendre. Again, kind of a smart-ass way of speaking to not only the way that we've done things in the past, but how we intend to do things in the future. So as far as we're concerned, one of the biggest telltale signs of a restaurant that is either staffed inefficient or staffed poorly or that doesn't have their productivity figured out is an empty table. So very often, sometimes you'll go into a restaurant and that table will be clearly have been sat in. There's, glasses and empty dishes on the table, but there is not staff to go ahead and bust that and to turn the table. Very often, the solution to a lot of restaurant operations isn't cutting back on staff, isn't raising the prices, but is looking for the missed opportunities of revenue that are there present on a table that can't be sat, if that makes any sense. And turning the table also has a connotation to, we want to flip the script about how restaurants operate. Not necessarily speaking about what you're doing in your operation, but the way that you look at your operations. Perspective is everything. And that's probably why the only reason that you would ever hire a coach or a mentor is to have somebody hold you accountable to what you say you're going to do and to offer a perspective that's different than yours. Now, the problem with that is that a lot of times we're absolutely wedded to what we believe. It's served us so far, and it's hard to give that up. So how do you go ahead and do that? Well, first off, you have to be willing to be coached, or you have to be coachable. Speaking for myself only, the only time I was ever coachable is when I stopped believing my own shit because I looked at my results, and the results were not getting any better. As a matter of fact, they were progressively getting worse and worse based upon the way that I was viewing not only my position, but the way that I ran my businesses. It was only until I was willing to take a look at the results I was getting that I was willing to look at how I was going about getting those results and realizing that, hey, I could really use an outside perspective. And I'm not talking about, talking to your buddy at the bar after a shift, having a beer, because very often that descends into a bitch fest where everybody's kind of commiserating with one another about how things suck and how things never change. And as long as you're engaged in that type of behavior, you're being a victim to your circumstance and nothing ever changes. At least it didn't in my life. So turning the table has a couple different connotations, and we were kind of smirking to one another about like, yeah, that's kind of cool, huh? Anyway. So our objective is to turn the table on not only the industry, but on the way we view and interpret the industry. And that very often comes from the data. Now, to most people in the restaurant industry, I want to give a big shout out to Bing Oliver, because I was speaking to him right before we got on the show, who is a coach and mentor to operators who want to go beyond just managing their business to actually leading it. And
again, we were kind of commiserating around some of the same stuff and realizing that as long as there's commiseration, there's really no, if it's a bubble and all of us have the same opinion, then there's no growth there. And growth very often comes from pain. And as much as I moved away from pain and towards pleasure, I was never going to get to the crux of my problem. So the question is, how painful do things have to be in your operation before you're willing to consider an outside perspective or opinion? Now, the reason that we at Benchmark 60 don't deal with opinion is because it's subjective. That's why we always rely on the data, because the data tells the story. Doesn't tell the complete story. It just tells a portion of the story. Now, Bing and I were talking about how most of the people in the industry are, I made the point that typically people in the restaurant industry are highly sensitive, which is kind of funny because some of the hardest people I've ever met are in this industry, or like that's the armor that they need to put on in order to get through a specific shift. So the fact is that if you are in the industry in any capacity, just get over it, man. You're sensitive. You're a sensitive soul, or else you wouldn't be in service to other people. Give a shit. Like, I got other things better to do with my time. So what is it about us as individuals and professionals that we would subjugate ourselves to, and very often subjugate our desires and things that we want for our life? Why do we actually put those lower on the totem pole and put others higher? Well, because we like to be in service, because there's something that we get emotionally from serving others. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's empathy. It's compassion. It's, to put it bluntly, love. No other reason why we should do it. And so after a while in the industry and you build up enough thick skin, then you realize that you need to put that armor on every day to come into work. However, if you start to look around and things haven't changed and they look the same as they've always done, at what point do you say, I'm going to tap out? I need to check out. I need to talk to someone else. Talk to someone else whom I appreciate, who I look up to, who I respect. Just yesterday afternoon, I booked a coaching client, somebody who I've known for quite some time and have always been willing to talk to, listen to them on the phone, not necessarily coach them, but just kind of listen to what they have to say. And they got to a point where they said, hey, I could really use some coaching. I was like, great, I'm ready to go. The difference between coaching and empathizing is, to give you a short description, I was consistently trying to coach and tell my kids what to do, until I realized that very often what I said went against the grain and they did the exact opposite because they wanted to learn from their own experiences, which is great. I came from a position of wanting to save them from that type of pain that I knew might be at the end of that particular choice because I had made the similar choice. But for most children, don't stick your finger in the light socket. Don't. Oh, okay, you stuck your finger in the light socket. So how did that feel? But my relationship was always strained with my kids because I was trying to tell them what to do. I thought it was coaching or mentoring or whatever it was. The only time anything changed is when I just loved them. When my daughter called me up from Florida and she's basically living out of her car because her boyfriend had kicked her out and she was at the end of her rope, and I listened to her cry and cry and cry and cry. I wanted to rush down there and save her. I wanted to do all these things and lift her up, put her on my shoulders. And then I realized if I did that, then I would be hobbling her for the rest of her life. That at that critical moment in her life, that what she needed was someone to tell her that she knew what to do, that she had the resources, the emotional intelligence to figure her way out. And so I just loved her up. And within a day or so, she figured it out, and she is now leading a life that I could never have imagined for her. Both of my daughters are doing incredibly well. They're making their way in their own life on their own speed, but it wasn't because anything I taught them or told them. It was because I was just willing to be empathetic, be an ear, be a shoulder. That's not the same thing as coaching and mentoring. And so the first question I always have are you coachable? Are you willing to consider another perspective? And that's a powerful moment. And the second question that I then ask is, do you trust me? And I've had to ask that question of many members of my family, only to find out that some people said, no, I don't trust you, based upon the way that you've showed up and whatever story that they had in their mind. And it was incredibly painful to do that, to ask and then to listen. And I just sat in the fire. I didn't make them wrong for what they were feeling, because how could I possibly do that? It's the way they feel. Can't tell them that they're wrong for that. And so I used those opportunities to kind of gird myself for my own self-growth and do my own work first, which is why I'm able to be here now, why I'm so grateful to be part of the Benchmark 60 team, which consists of, I think now 10 or 12 different people, all who have a primary focus in their businesses that is complementary to Benchmark 60. So when we bring Benchmark 60 to your operation, there is, yes, the data-based forecasting and managing of productivity and workload for your staff, but there's also the opportunity to dive into other things, other areas of concern, how you're doing insofar as recruiting. Are there people on your staff that would love leadership examining? Is there anybody who works in a retirement community? Because we have specialists on board who specifically focus on those market shares. So within the Benchmark 60 family, there is someone who has a particular specialty that can serve you if that's what you're looking for. But very often it starts with an empty table that I can't get bussed, and I'm working really, really hard, and I'm not seeing any results, and I'm frustrated, and I got to figure out a way out of this. And then what we do is we come in and we ask for 4 data points, and we plug those into a matrix, and then we sit down and have a conversation. And again, this is not opinion. This is not about us telling you what to do. The fact of the matter is, you know your business better than anyone else. So it would be imprudent at the least and insulting at the most for us to come in and say, well, we think you need to do this or we think you need that. No. We respect you as the professional in that particular organization who is in the position because of their ability, their intelligence, and their ability to manage and motivate their staff. But the problems that exist in the restaurant industry are not about motivation. They're not about inspiration. They're about really concrete issues. First off is, why can't I retain staff? Why are people jumping ship for 25 cents an hour? Here in Asheville, North Carolina, where I live, that's a reality. If you go to the MIT Living Wage Calculator, you can go by state, by county, and by city to figure out what exactly is a living wage. And for Asheville, it's about $37,000 if you happen to have one child and a single parent. Most restaurant jobs don't pay anywhere near that. So, which is why most of the people don't live here in Asheville. They live outside of the community. And then they have to add on a stressful commute because of all the bedroom communities that are popping up out of Asheville, which is kind of crazy to say, but there are bedroom communities popping up all outside of Asheville. The roads have become unmanageable. So now they're in the middle of this multi-year expansion of every road that leads to Asheville. And now your commutes are 3 to 4 times longer than what they should. So your staff is stressed by the time they get there, and they're stressed when they leave. So the question is why are my staff leaving for 25 cents an hour? Is it really about the 25 cents an hour? I was working with a young lady who came into my office and said, listen, I need to get a raise. And I said, listen, you are at the top tier of your job classification. You're at the top end of the salary cap at that position, and there's nowhere for you to go unless you want to take on a supervisory role and do a lot of hot food. And at that point, she was the magician in Garde. She handled everything, but she was comfortable there. So she's on the verge of tears. And I asked a question that fortuitously popped in my mind. I says, is this, really about need to make more money? Like, what is the issue? And then everything broke down, and it was about the fact that she could not afford insurance based upon how the company had set it up for her children. One was in college and one was still young. And so I was able to assist her by finding an outside insurance company that had better plans than what existed at the facility. And within about several weeks, I checked back in with her, and she had made the phone calls and done her due diligence and secured insurance for her and her children. And all of a sudden, that changed everything for her. Now, not every situation is going to be the same way, but very often, the answer is not as apparent as just throwing more money at it. There are many ways in which to increase staff retention and to create a point of attraction for potential new hires. In every single town across this country and in the world, there's always one operation in that city or town that everybody on the street knows treats their people better than the others. I often use the Jim Noble example from around Raleigh, where Jim Noble has created this little empire of several different restaurants. He has a food pantry for the poor. He's very faith-driven, so there's a church involved. The point being is that Jim has put out a statement to all his managers that says, if anybody comes in to apply for a position and that position is filled, but they have the right attitude, don't let them get out the building. We'll find a place for them. Now, I'll bet it wasn't too long after he started instituting that everybody on the street figured out that if they really wanted to get taken care of or be valued as a team member, then all they had to do was show up on the door of Noble restaurants. Fantastic. It doesn't always come down to money. There are things that you can do right now to ensure better staff retention and become a point of attraction. Before I get there, I want to talk about efficiency versus productivity. We, as a culture, as a profession, as an industry, whatever term you want to use, we have had to become more efficient, period. It's been hammered into us because of a lot of times forces from outside our market, right? Whether it was COVID, whether it's now all of a sudden, supply chains are broken. All these different things. If you're in a market where you can't get your orders more than twice a week, and you can't go down the street to do a pickup, then you have to get really efficient at how you order your food and how you manage that food. If you're low on staffing, then you're going to get really efficient at moving those pieces around. And I don't want to refer to people as pieces, but operationally speaking, there are positions that need to get moved around in order for you to be able to get that day done. Totally get that. Efficiency has been pounded into us, but efficiency is not productivity. Okay? Efficiency is reactive. So when you know that there's a problem, then you can react to it. Productivity, on the other hand, is proactive. So imagine for a moment that you could find data and interpret it in such a way that you knew exactly who was going to come to you in the next 2 weeks and tell you that they were burned out. How powerful would that be? If you could put everything into your matrix, and this is the beauty about Benchmark 60. Benchmark 60 is not a solution that you keep on forever. We teach you how to actually manage this yourself so that you can be your own guru, so that you can be your own hero, so that you can be the one that everybody looks to as, wow, they really take care of us because they're protecting our workload. Two of the biggest reasons why people will leave: number one, lack of communication. Number two, that their workloads are too much. What if you knew by moving around just a few pieces? Hey, Rodney, what's up, brother? Thanks for joining us. I didn't know this could show up. Yeah, so please, by all means, post your comments, suggestions, smart-ass remarks in the chat, and I'll make sure at the end that we have time to address those. Thanks, Rodney. Really appreciate you showing up, man. So imagine if you could proactively forecast accurately who you're going to put where so that they can be not only as effective as they can, but also as productive they can to a degree. Like there's a number that you'll come to understand in benchmark 60 that you never want to go above, because as soon as you see that number, you know that everybody was overworked and stressed. Jim likes to use this example of, he was talking to a district manager and a general manager, and there was a productivity number that was really, really high. And the district manager said, "Wow, man, that's fantastic. We need to have more days like that." And the general manager was shaking his head. He's like, "No, we can't have another day like that." The district manager said, "Why?" He said, "I was 3 people short. I worked the full shift as the general manager and then had to work the entire night as the bartender because the bartender showed up. And at the end of the night, we lost 2 people who walked out because it was too busy. They couldn't handle it." How many of us have seen, as we're sitting in a restaurant, a server crouched or standing in a side station almost on the verge of tears because it's just too much? Benchmark 60 actually teaches you to be able to pinpoint those situations ahead of time so that you can proactively manage your staff and what they do, to the extent that at the end of the shift, everybody's smiling. That's pretty groovy. I mean, I can't tell you how powerful that is for me as an operator and as manager, because I know that there's not a single restaurant owner, manager, chef, GM, district manager who's watching this right now that doesn't want to take care of their people better. They know, you know, that it is the number one greatest attribute to your success and detriment to your failure. It's a significant part of your business. What if you knew that you were leaving money on the table because you were so short-staffed that you couldn't bus that table? What if you knew that all you needed to do was staff appropriately to get, I don't know, another dessert sale because the servers had enough time to actually do the menu tour correctly and to guide the guests through that, instead of being triple sat and just whipping it through? It is so powerful, folks, I can't even tell you. And it is the gateway to understanding that because you have these opportunities, these missed opportunities, that you can directly reinvest in your staff in such a way that maybe you couldn't see how you could provide healthcare before, but now you can. Maybe you have people on your staff that are making a decision whether to go to the doctor or send their dog to the vet. And so they send their dog to the vet because they love the dog more. It happens. There are companies out there now who are providing pet insurance. Can you believe that? Pet insurance. Who would have thought of that? The problem is that as we rise in the pyramid of supervision, we start to disassociate ourselves from what it's actually like to be on that line position, to actually have to do that commute from Hendersonville all the way to Asheville, because it's not in our direct line of sight, so to speak. And it's a tragic thing, but it's also a part of our self-survival modes, right? Because again, if we're sensitive people who love what we do and love the people that we do it with, how much of your heart can you actually open up to the dismay and the despair and the strife that some of your staff are having? It can be completely overwhelming. It could paralyze you to the point where you just don't know what to do. So you keep your head down and you keep doing it. It's a tough situation. You know it. We know it. But you get to know that we at Benchmark 60 are here to provide you with a solution that supports you not only in the short term, but in the long term, that you can self-manage and create the culture and the community, the internal community within your organization that will support your growth without necessarily giving away margin or profit or any of that stuff. What if it was like all those little pennies? I had an operations manager called Ron Ager who was a maniac because as the servers would come through the kitchen door, the breeze would blow off all the bev naps off the tray. And he would scramble around picking up those bev naps because he kept saying, "It's 7 cents. It's 7 cents. Yeah, To a certain extent, this is exactly what it's about. It's about the pennies building up to dollars. And it's never anything big. It's all these little attunements that you can make to your operation as the operator, guided by the data, that will provide such a different environment for your staff. They'll never have to wonder about why people are leaving, because they won't. They won't leave because they know that you're protecting them. And in this day and age, safety in the workplace is something that no one really talks about, especially in restaurants. OSHA, forget it. But it's also about, the physical safety is one thing, but the emotional safety is something also. Like, can you imagine what it would feel like to be able to provide a solution to that staff member who is struggling to find insurance? All it takes is a little time. So again, as a cost, it's actually costing you something because there's a direct value, dollar value to your time. But really, what's it going to cost you, man? To go that little bit farther. We want a stronger commitment from our staff members to be able to grow our business. What you get to understand is that they require a deeper commitment from you. Protecting them, protecting the workload, protecting the working environment is job one to produce a internal community and a culture that anyone would want to work in. Pretty cool, huh? All right, let's check the chat, see if there's anything in there. Love the show, my dude. More people need, especially in our industry. Well, that's why we're doing it, brother. Every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern time. The idea is to provide some ideas so that you can walk right back into your operation, check in, talk about it, and maybe implement something that can shift your culture, your workplace culture immediately. Because if staff see that you're making an effort, they might be okay with not necessarily seeing the results. Not all of us are so wired that we need instant gratification, even though that's the industry has trained, shamed, and conditioned us into. But there's also a benefit to delaying gratification and being able to communicate effectively, consistently, daily, so that people know what you're doing and why you're doing it and to what end you want by doing it. Again, takes a little bit of your time. It's going to cause you to be vulnerable and transparent, which some people are not comfortable with. And I would say, yeah, I hope you get over it, because there are folks right next to you right now that need you in your highest intention in order to provide a community in which they feel valued, respected, cared for, heard. And it's nothing new. This is all stuff that we all wanted, isn't it? It's what you wanted. It's what I wanted. So we get to band together to create a community, a culture, an industry far better than when we found it. So that's it for today for Turning the Table. My name is Adam Lamb. I so look forward to seeing you next week. Please like, share, and comment, and we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Turning the Table with me, Adam Lamb, and Jim Taylor. This episode was sponsored by Benchmark 60. We're on a mission to change the food and beverage industry by focusing on staff mental health and well-being, by forecasting and actively managing workload productivity. Over 200 restaurants and food and beverage operations have discovered for themselves how to increase staff retention and become a preferred employer in their market by using our proprietary system. If you'd like to have an operational culture that everybody wants to work for, then check out Benchmark 60 on the web at www.benchmark60.com. Thanks for taking the time to be with us and the courage to try new things for the restaurant profession's oldest problems. Turning the Table is a production of Realignment Media.